During our university years, my friends Jack, Sophia and I boarded a small boat bound for a remote island off the coast of Maine. The island was said to have once housed an abandoned psychiatric hospital. We were there for a summer work project, helping to renovate an old hotel, while also hoping to experience the rumored supernatural phenomena. By the time we arrived at Perry Island, night had already fallen. A middle-aged man named Tom greeted us at the dock. He was the caretaker of the hotel, and the only resident on the island. He informed us that the hotel's owners were unwell and unable to come, but they had prepared everything for our stay. As we followed a narrow path toward the hotel, a figure in a black robe emerged from the forest. It was an elderly priest, his face deeply lined with age, yet his eyes were strikingly resolute. He gave us a slight nod and briefly introduced himself as a visitor to the island, then disappeared down another path. His presence sent a chill down my spine, but curiosity pushed us forward. Tom led us on a tour of the hotel, a Victorian-style building covered in creeping vines, its windows draped with tattered curtains. A damp, musty smell filled the air, making the place feel unsettling. Tom mentioned that this building had once been part of the island's psychiatric hospital before it was converted into a hotel, though business had always been poor. We lingered at the entrance for a moment, the salty sea breeze cooling our skin. Tom reminded us to get some rest, since there was much work to be done the next day. I returned to my room and lay down, but sleep eluded me. I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that something in this house was watching me. At midnight, I was awakened by a strange noise like footsteps pacing in the hallway. I climbed out of bed and quietly opened the door. The corridor was pitch dark, except for the pale moonlight filtering through the windows. I followed the sound down the hall, my heartbeat quickening. When I reached the staircase, I noticed a faint glow seeping from a room on the second floor. I cautiously ascended the stairs, holding my breath. As I neared the door, the footsteps suddenly ceased. Taking a deep breath, I slowly pushed the door open. A strong scent of incense filled the room. In the center stood a strange altar, covered with candles and symbols I didn't recognize. Beside the altar sat an old doll, its face painted with an unsettling grin. Just as I was about to leave, a whisper sounded behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing there. Yet the feeling of being watched intensified, sending a shiver down my spine. I rushed downstairs, locked myself in my room, and tried to steady my breathing. The next morning, we began cleaning the hotel. Jack and Tom worked on the basement while Sophia and I tidied the guest rooms. I noticed that Jack seemed distracted, constantly glancing out the window. When I asked him what was wrong, he just smiled and said it was nothing. That evening, we gathered for dinner. Tom shared an old legend about the island years ago. A fire had broken out at the psychiatric hospital, claiming the lives of many patients and staff. Their spirits, trapped on the island, were never able to find peace. The hotel owners were their descendants, trying to appease them through offerings and rituals. After dinner, Jack suddenly suggested exploring the island ruins. Though hesitant, Sophia and I agreed. Under the moonlight, the abandoned hospital buildings loomed eerily. Inside, a foul stench filled the air. Jack's flashlight flickered across the walls, revealing old bloodstains and strange symbols. I felt nauseous, and was about to leave, when a chilling laugh echoed through the building, a low, sinister sound that seemed to rise from the depths of hell. We spun around, but saw nothing. Jack's face turned pale. Without hesitation, we fled the ruins and returned to the hotel. That night, as I lay in bed, the oppressive feeling of being watched returned. Then I heard soft footsteps approaching my bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to calm myself. But as the footsteps grew closer, I couldn't resist opening them. A shadowy figure stood at my bedside dressed in a white gown, its face void of features except for two hollow eyes. I screamed in terror, and the figure vanished. Rushing into the hallway, I found Jack and Sophia there as well. They, too, had seen the apparition, Fearful, we huddled together in the living room for the rest of the night. By morning, we decided to leave the island. But when we reached the dock, our boat was gone. Tom informed us that the waves had overturned it. We would have to wait for rescue. With no choice, we returned to the hotel. That night, the eerie sounds returned, this time coming from the basement. Jack insisted on investigating, and we followed. The air was thick with dampness, the walls adorned with unsettling paintings. In one room, we found an old well. A whisper drifted from its depths as Jack approached. A sudden burst of black smoke erupted from the altar, engulfing us. My vision blurred, and I lost consciousness. When I awoke, I found myself in an unfamiliar room, my body paralyzed. Shadows loomed in the corners, and I heard faint breathing. Something else was in the room with me. My gaze landed on the ancient paintings lining the walls. The figures inside seemed to smile in the darkness. As my mind cleared, I realized I was back in the well room. Jack and Sophia lay beside the well, their hands folded over their chests, as if in deep slumber. "Welcome, William," a voice spoke behind me. I turned to see Tom standing in the doorway, his face twisted into an eerie grin. As he stepped toward me, the door suddenly burst open. The black-robed priest stormed in, his expression stern, a crucifix clutched in his hand. "Back, servants of darkness," he commanded, his voice echoing through the room. The crucifix gleamed, casting light into the shadows. The priest began chanting a prayer, his voice firm and unwavering. A sacred energy filled the space, extinguishing the candles on the altar. Tom let out a blood-curdling scream, his form contorting as if in agony. From the depths of the well, a monstrous growl rumbled, sending shivers down my spine. The priest stood resolute, raising the crucifix higher. The air crackled with unseen forces as he continued his exorcism. The black mist recoiled, and Tom's body twisted violently before dissolving into the darkness. "Are you all right, child?" the priest asked, stepping toward me. I nodded shakily. "How did you find us?" he sighed. "This island has long been plagued by darkness. I came to purge it, but didn't expect you to be caught in this battle." He explained that the evil had not been destroyed, only temporarily sealed. Tom had been merely a puppet, manipulated by the sinister forces lurking in the island's depths. With his help, I woke Jack and Sophia. They were dazed but unharmed. The priest led us out, his presence shielding us from the unseen terrors lingering in the shadows. As we stepped outside, the first rays of dawn bathed the island in golden light. The priest remained silent, guiding us back to the dock. He gazed at the old hotel one last time, his expression unreadable. "You must leave," he said softly. "I will remain here, fulfilling my duty." I understood then this was his calling. He would not leave. He would fight until the darkness was truly vanquished. "We will remember you, Father," I said, my voice heavy with emotion. He smiled faintly. "Darkness never truly disappears, but it will never triumph over the light." As our rescue boat pulled away, I looked back at the island. It lay still under the morning sun, as if all had been a dream. On the dock, the priest stood alone, watching us depart. His silhouette, bathed in golden light, was the last thing I saw before the island disappeared from view. Jack, Sophia, and I carried our memories of that night with us, sailing toward an uncertain future. I love traveling, and exploring the world has always been my dream. As a young person, I didn't have the financial means to make that dream a reality. So, I chose to work in exchange for accommodation, allowing me to travel while earning a living. This time, I arrived at a small island in Southeast Asia, famous for its crystal-clear waters and rich marine life. The scenery on the island was breathtaking, azure waters blending with pristine white sands, like a corner of paradise. I applied for a part-time job at a local diving center, assisting instructors and maintaining diving equipment. This job not only gave me the chance to experience the ocean up close, but also allowed me to learn diving skills. It was a dream come true. The diving centre was owned by an Australian man named Lucas, who welcomed me warmly and arranged for me to stay in a small wooden cabin behind the centre. Though simple, the cabin had a window overlooking the vast ocean, and at night, I could hear the waves gently lapping against the shore, bringing me a sense of peace. After my first day of work, Lucas familiarized me with the diving gear and told me I could join the team for a dive the next day. The underwater world here is unbelievably beautiful, he said, but there are some places you should be cautious of, especially the shipwreck site to the north. Early the next morning, we set off by boat. The sunlight shimmered on the water surface like a layer of scattered diamonds. I put on my diving gear and followed instructor Eric and a group of tourists into the water. The underwater world was as breathtaking as Lucas had described: vivid coral reefs, schools of tropical fish, and gracefully gliding sea turtles. It felt like a dream. However, as we approached the shipwreck site, the atmosphere suddenly became eerie. The wreck was an old cargo ship, its hull covered in coral and seaweed, exuding an ominous, mysterious aura. Eric signaled for us not to get too close, but I felt an inexplicable pull, drawing me toward the wreck. That's when I saw him, a figure in an old-fashioned diving suit standing on the ship's deck, his back facing me. Assuming he was another diver, I swam closer to greet him, but as I neared, he suddenly turned around. His face was completely blank, devoid of any features, just a shadowy void. Panic surged through me, and I nearly choked on water as I frantically backed away. When I looked again, the figure had vanished. My heart pounded as I swam back to Eric, but he and the others seemed unaware of anything unusual. Back on the boat, I told Lucas about what I had seen, but he merely chuckled. It was probably just a trick of the light, don't worry too much about it. But it wasn't over. That night, I lay awake in my cabin, feeling an unsettling presence outside my window. I got up and pulled back the curtain, only to see the dark expanse of the ocean. Just as I turned to go back to bed, I heard a soft, rhythmic tapping like someone knocking gently on the window. Summoning my courage, I opened the window. The salty sea breeze rushed in. Out on the water, barely visible in the moonlight, stood a figure. He was motionless, his silhouette blending with the waves, but I could see his arms slowly rise, beckoning me. My breath caught in my throat. I slammed the window shut, drew the curtains, and curled up in bed, trembling until morning. In the following days, the figure haunted both my dreams and reality. Every time I dove, I could feel his presence watching, waiting. Determined to uncover the truth, I researched the island's history and discovered a tragic shipwreck. A cargo vessel had sunk in a storm, leaving no survivors. I sought out an elderly local man, who told me about a young crew member from the wreck. His name was Theodore. He had loved the sea, but his life was cut short by the disaster. The old man said Theodore's soul still lingered, searching for someone who could understand him. Determined to find answers, I dove alone to the shipwreck site once more. This time, I saw the faceless figure waiting. He beckoned again, and despite my fear, curiosity pushed me forward. He led me to a gaping hole in the ship's hull. As I swam inside, he vanished. I looked around in confusion when, suddenly, icy hands gripped my throat. I thrashed in terror, struggling to break free, but his strength was overwhelming. He reached for my oxygen mask, pulling it away as I desperately fought to reclaim it. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. I stared into his void-like face and finally understood he wasn't seeking understanding. He was searching for a replacement. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, I heard a voice. Through the murky water, Eric was swimming toward me, his expression urgent. He thrust a spare oxygen mask into my hands and pulled me toward the surface. My last memory before blacking out was his worried face. When I awoke, I was in a hospital bed. Eric sat beside me, concern etched into his features. He told me they had noticed my absence and launched an immediate search. If he had arrived any later, I wouldn't have survived. The spirits of the sea are not as kind as the legends say, Eric said solemnly. They are trapped, filled with resentment and rage. Theodore wasn't looking for someone to understand him, he was looking for someone to take his place. His words sent a chill through me. That summer, I learned to face my fears and realize the fragility and value of life. And even now, whenever I look at the vast, endless sea, I remember Theodore's story, the warning he left behind, and the lesson he taught me about courage and vigilance. My father passed away when I was very young, and my mother raised me alone. The year one graduated from university. She also left me. That was the darkest moment of my life. I chose to spend a year doing work exchange programs, traveling while trying to figure out my future. However, even after a year, I still couldn't move past my grief. As another summer arrived, I found work at a seaside guest house. It was inexpensive and close to the ocean, attracting many backpackers. On the front desk sat a guestbook, where travelers often left short messages. This guestbook became my nightly solace. I would flip through its pages in the quiet of the night, imagining the lives behind those words. Recently, a series of messages signed by someone named Tracy caught my attention. Her words were always filled with warmth and encouragement, like personalized doses of soul-healing medicine. She wrote, "Dear traveler, life is like the waves, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm, but always bringing new surprises. Don't fear the low tides, for they are the moments when you rediscover yourself." Her words touched me deeply, as if she could see right through my fragile heart. Curious about Tracy, I asked Tom, the guest house owner, about her, but he simply waved me off impatiently, saying, "Don't ask about the guests. That's the rule." Tracy's messages continued for 2 weeks. I couldn't help but ask Tom, "Has anyone stayed here for that long?" He frowned and replied, "Impossible. No one stays here for more than 3 days." Shortly after, Tracy's messages stopped. I felt an unexpected sense of loss. However, a new name, Beth, started appearing in the guestbook. Her words carried the same warmth and wisdom, as if guiding me toward the light. She wrote, "Dear stranger, don't let the shadows of the past obscure your future. Remember, every dawn is a new beginning." Once again, her words resonated with me, but deep down, I began to feel uneasy. The timing of these messages was too coincidental, as if someone was secretly watching me, writing precisely what I needed to hear. A week later, Beth's messages also vanished, replaced by another woman named Elizabeth. Her writing style was identical to Tracy's, and Beth's, always saying exactly what I needed at the moment. The eeriness of it all unsettled me. One midnight, I woke up to use the restroom. As I passed through the hallway, I suddenly saw a white figure flash by. My heart pounded. Thinking it might be a thief, I decided to quietly follow. The figure moved lightly, almost weightlessly. I held my breath, carefully trailing behind. As I reached the lobby, the white figure suddenly disappeared, as if it had never been there. A chill ran down my spine as terrifying thoughts flooded my mind. Had I just encountered a ghost? The idea sent shivers through me. Yet, at the same time, an odd sense of familiarity washed over me. I thought of the warm messages in the guestbook, and strangely, a feeling of peace replaced my fear. Perhaps, this presence wasn't here to frighten me, but to accompany me. A few nights later, I stayed awake, waiting in my room, until 3 a.m. I crept downstairs, hiding in the shadows near the front desk, anticipating that mysterious moment. Sure enough, I soon heard a faint rustling sound. The guestbook flipped open, its pages turning gently in the breeze. My heartbeat quickened as I held my breath, eyes locked onto the front desk. Then, a pen lifted into the air on its own, floating in the darkness before gliding across the pages. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I rushed toward the desk, but the pen didn't stop. It continued moving, forming lines of familiar handwriting. Dear Aiden, I know you've been searching for answers. I wrote these messages because I couldn't bear to see you so sad. Life is fleeting, but love never fades. Remember, no matter where you are, I will always be with you. Tears streamed down my face. It was my mother's handwriting. It was her voice. She had been with me all along, comforting my shattered heart with her words. That August, I packed my bags and took the guestbook that Tom had given me. I decided to return to the home my mother and I had once shared. Before I left, Tom patted my shoulder and said softly, "Your mother was an incredible woman. She's always been watching over you in her own way." Back home, I placed the guestbook on my bookshelf. On its last page, a final message read, "Dear Aiden, life is a journey. Sadness is a part of it, but not all of it. Be brave and move forward, because you will never be alone. Love, Mom." As I closed the guestbook, a profound sense of peace and strength filled my heart. That summer, I finally learned to make peace with my grief. I also understood my mother's love would never leave me. The waves continued to crash against the shore, and I was finally ready to embrace the next chapter of my life.